Hey Reddit, this is my first time posting here, but I don't know where else to turn. My head's a mess, and my heart feels like it's been ripped out of my chest. If anyone's been through something similar, I'd love your advice, or maybe I just need to vent and try to make sense of what happened. A little about me. I'm a simple guy. I work a steady job, come home to my wife, Emily, and up until recently, I thought we had a solid, if not perfect, marriage. We've been together for 12 years. That's more than a decade of shared laughs, fights, struggles, and what I thought was love. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any other couple, but I always believed we had each other's backs. Apparently, I was dead wrong. It started last week, on a Thursday night. Emily was getting dressed up, like really dressed up. I'm talking the kind of effort she usually reserved for weddings or fancy events. Tight black dress, high heels, her hair styled perfectly, and makeup done like a professional. I couldn't help but notice because, let's be real, it's not every day your wife goes all out like that. Got plans tonight? I asked casually, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced at me through the mirror, not even bothering to make proper eye contact. Yeah, I'm meeting a friend for dinner, she said, her voice dripping with nonchalance. A friend? Since when did friends require that level of effort? My gut was already twisting, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking. But the little voice in my head kept screaming, something's off. Who's the friend? I pressed, trying to sound curious rather than accusatory. She finally looked at me, her face an unreadable mask. It's just someone from work. Don't wait up, I might be late. And that was it. She grabbed her purse and walked out the door, leaving me sitting on the couch, staring after her like an idiot. My stomach churned, but I told myself not to overreact. Emily had never given me a reason not to trust her before. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. Hours passed, and she still wasn't home. I tried to distract myself, watched some TV, scrolled through my phone, but my mind kept drifting back to her. Who was she really with? Why did she look like she was going on a date? Finally, around midnight, she walked through the door. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and there was a slight blush on her cheeks. Late night, huh? I said, keeping my voice neutral even though my heart was pounding in my chest. She waved me off like I was being dramatic. Yeah, I told you I might be late. Don't make a big deal out of it. And then she said the words that lit a fire in my chest. I'll make it up to you later. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Was I supposed to be grateful for the crumbs of affection she'd tossed my way after spending the night God knows where with God knows who? I didn't push her that night. I couldn't. I felt like if I opened my mouth, I'd explode, and I didn't want to say something I'd regret. But the next morning, I couldn't stay quiet. Emily, I said as she sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone like everything was fine. Where were you last night? She raised an eyebrow, barely glancing up. I told you. I was with a friend from work. Which friend? I pressed, my voice firmer this time. Why are you interrogating me? She snapped, slamming her coffee mug down. I don't need to justify every little thing I do. Do you tell me about every time you grab a beer with a coworker? The way she turned it around on me, like I was the one in the wrong, made my blood boil, but I bit my tongue and nodded. Okay, but if there's nothing to hide, why not just tell me who you were with? Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. But then she smirked, a cold, condescending smirk that made me feel 2 inches tall. You're being ridiculous, she said, grabbing her bag. I'm going out. Don't wait up. And just like that, she was gone again. This time, I wasn't going to sit around and wait like an idiot. I had a bad feeling, and I needed answers. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. What I saw that night shattered me. I never thought I'd become that guy. You know, the one who sneaks around and spies on his own wife. But after the way Emily had been acting, I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I told myself it was better to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. That night, I parked a few houses down from our driveway and waited for her to leave. She didn't take long. Around 7 p.m., she strutted out the front door wearing another one of those tight dresses that seemed way too fancy for dinner with a friend. Her perfume was strong enough that I could smell it even from my car. My stomach churned as I watched her climb into her car and drive off. I followed at a distance, my heart racing. I kept telling myself she was going to prove me wrong, that I'd feel like a paranoid fool when she actually met a group of coworkers at some restaurant. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. She pulled into the parking lot of a dimly lit bar about 20 minutes away. Not a restaurant, not some casual work hangout, a bar. I parked across the street and waited, watching as she got out of her car and walked in. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. About 10 minutes later, I saw him. A man walked in, tall, muscular, the kind of guy who looked like he spent half his life in the gym. He was well-dressed, too, like he was heading to a nightclub rather than a dive bar. I didn't recognize him, but the way he looked around, almost like he was searching for someone, made my chest tighten. Sure enough, Emily walked out to meet him. She greeted him with a smile that I hadn't seen in years, a smile that was meant for me. Then, to my horror, she hugged him. Not a friendly hug, but one of those slow, intimate embraces that lasts just a little too long. I couldn't breathe. It felt like my entire world had crumbled in a matter of seconds. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to march in there and confront them, to demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, watching as they walked inside together. I stayed in my car for what felt like an eternity, debating what to do. Should I follow them in? Should I take photos? Should I call her and demand she come home? A million thoughts raced through my head, but I couldn't bring myself to do anything. Eventually, I decided to get out of the car. My legs felt like jelly as I crossed the street and approached the bar. I kept my distance, peeking through the windows like some kind of pathetic stalker. And that's when I saw them. They were sitting in a corner booth, laughing and talking like they didn't have a care in the world. She leaned in close, her hand resting on his arm, and he responded by tucking her hair behind her ear. It was the kind of tenderness that used to be ours, and seeing it with someone else was like a knife to the gut. I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped a few photos with my phone, not because I wanted evidence, but because I needed to convince myself that this was real. That my wife, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, was sitting there with another man like I didn't even exist. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, they stood up. She grabbed his hand, and he led her toward the back of the bar. My stomach dropped. I knew what was back there. Private rooms. It was one of those places where people could rent out spaces for, let's just say, less than innocent activities. I stumbled back to my car, my mind racing. What the hell was I supposed to do? Burst in and catch them in the act? Wait until she came home and confront her? Or should I just leave? Walk away from everything and never look back? I sat in my car for hours, replaying everything over and over in my head. By the time I finally drove home, it was well past midnight. Emily still wasn't back. When she finally walked through the door around 2 a.m., she looked surprised to see me awake. "Why are you still up?" she asked, kicking off her heels like she'd just come back from a regular night out. I stared at her, my throat dry. "Where were you?" She hesitated for just a second, a brief pause that told me everything I needed to know. But then she shrugged, her tone annoyingly casual. "I told you, I was out with a friend." "Which friend?" I pressed, my voice barely above a whisper. She rolled her eyes, her expression turning cold. "Why do you care so much? God, you're acting so needy lately. It's pathetic." Pathetic. That word cut deeper than any insult she could have thrown at me. But I didn't respond. I just nodded and went to bed, leaving her standing there in the living room. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily with that man, laughing, touching, sneaking off to God knows where in the back of that bar. The word pathetic echoed in my head like a taunt, over and over again. I felt like a fool, like I'd wasted 12 years of my life on someone who didn't even respect me enough to lie convincingly. By the time the sun came up, I'd made up my mind. I needed answers, and I needed them now. No more tiptoeing around, no more pretending everything was fine. If Emily wasn't going to give me the truth, I'd find it myself. She acted like nothing had happened that morning. She hummed to herself while making coffee, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just come home at 2 a.m. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd even feel guilty if she knew I'd followed her. Probably not. She seemed so confident, so untouchable. "I'm going out for a bit," I said, grabbing my keys. Emily didn't even look up. "Okay. Don't forget to grab milk if you stop by the store." Milk. That was her biggest concern. Not where I was going, not why I was leaving so early, just milk. My hands clenched around the keys as I walked out the door, resisting the urge to slam it behind me. My first stop was the bar. It was closed, of course, but I wasn't there to drink. I wanted to talk to someone who worked there, someone who might have seen Emily and her mystery man. I waited in my car until a young guy showed up to open the place. He couldn't have been more than 22, with a backwards cap and a bored expression. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual as I approached him. "I was here last night and left my wallet. I think I was sitting near the back. Do you remember seeing me?" He squinted at me like he wasn't sure if I was serious. I don't think so, man. But I wasn't really paying attention. You could check inside, though." "Actually," I said quickly, "I think I might have been sitting near this couple." The guy was tall, muscular, dark hair. The woman had blonde hair, black dress. Does that ring a bell? His expression shifted, just slightly. He definitely remembered them. "Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. They were here for a while, kept to themselves mostly. Did they rent a room in the back?" I asked, my stomach churning. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, man, I don't really want to get involved. If you're looking for your wallet, it's probably inside." I thanked him and left, even though his vague answer told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't just been sitting there chatting over drinks. They'd gone to the back rooms. My next stop was her phone. I knew I couldn't just ask to see it. She'd never let me, and even if she did, she'd probably deleted anything incriminating by now. But I wasn't completely clueless. I'd heard about apps and programs that could track activity, retrieve deleted messages, and even monitor calls. It took me hours to figure it out, but by the end of the day, I had everything set up. I'd installed tracking software on her phone while she was in the shower, and now all I had to do was wait. The next few days were torture. Emily acted like nothing was wrong, like we were just a regular married couple going through the motions of daily life. She smiled at me over dinner, kissed me on the cheek before bed, and even asked if I wanted to go out for brunch that weekend. But every time I looked at her, all I could think about was her with that man. And then the texts started coming in. I got the first notification while I was at work. It was from an unsaved number, but the messages made it clear who it was. Him. "Can't stop thinking about you." Her. "Last night was amazing. I needed that." My hands trembled as I read the messages, each one more damning than the last. They talked about how exciting it was to sneak around, how they couldn't wait to see each other again. She even joked about how clueless I was, saying she could get away with anything because I was too soft to confront her. By the time I got home, I was shaking with rage. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, scream at her, demand to know how she could do this to me. But I didn't. I forced myself to stay calm, to think logically. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny everything. I needed more proof, proof she couldn't talk her way out of. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I made a plan. If she wanted to act like I was clueless, fine. I'd let her think that for now. But when the time came, I'd make sure she couldn't escape the consequences of what she'd done. For the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I smiled when Emily smiled, laughed at her jokes, and even helped her plan a work event she claimed she was organizing. On the surface, I was the same clueless, trusting husband she thought she could walk all over. But inside, I was unraveling. The messages between her and the mystery man, who I now knew was named Ryan, continued. Every notification felt like another stab in the chest. She told him how much she missed him, how she couldn't wait to be in his arms again. Meanwhile, she barely touched me, barely looked at me unless it was to ask for something. It wasn't just the texts either. The tracking app showed me her locations in real time. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She'd meet him at hotels, his apartment, and sometimes even that same bar where I first saw them. The breaking point came on a Saturday. She was getting ready to go out again. this time claiming she was meeting some girlfriends for drinks. "You sure you're okay with me going out again?" she asked, smirking at me like she was testing how far she could push. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "You deserve a night out. I'll just hang out here and watch the game." She kissed me on the cheek, something she hadn't done in weeks, and walked out the door, humming to herself. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my phone and opened the tracking app. Sure enough, she was heading to the same hotel she'd been to twice that week. This time, I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen. I grabbed my keys and followed her, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. When I got to the hotel, I parked across the street and waited. A few minutes later, Ryan arrived. He walked in like he owned the place, wearing the same smug expression I'd seen through the bar window that night. They didn't even try to be discreet. Emily met him in the lobby, and they walked hand in hand to the elevators. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was it. I had all the proof I needed. The texts, the locations, and now this. But as much as I wanted to storm into that hotel and confront them, I knew it wouldn't accomplish anything. She'd just twist the story, make excuses, and somehow turn it all back on me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I captured the moment they walked into the elevator, laughing and holding each other like teenagers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show what was really going on. After they disappeared, I drove home, my mind racing. The next part of my plan was already forming, and I knew exactly how I was going to execute it. When Emily came home later that night, she was glowing. Her hair was a little messy, her lipstick slightly smudged, but she didn't seem to care. "Did you have fun with your friends?" I asked, pretending not to notice the obvious signs. She grinned. "Yeah, it was a great night. We should do a date night soon, just the two of us." Date night. The audacity of her words nearly made me laugh out loud. But I nodded and agreed, playing my role to perfection. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I took the final step. I printed out the texts, the GPS locations, and screenshots from the tracking app. I even included stills from the video I'd taken the night before. By the time I was done, I had a folder full of evidence that even she couldn't deny. But I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I had the upper hand. I spent the next few days quietly preparing for what came next. I contacted a divorce attorney, opened a separate bank account, and started transferring small amounts of money that she wouldn't notice. I even went through our shared accounts and took note of every questionable expense: hotel bookings, fancy dinners, and gifts I knew weren't for me. It was exhausting, pretending everything was fine while secretly plotting my escape. But every time I looked at her, I reminded myself why I was doing this. She thought she could have it all: me, her comfortable life, and Ryan on the side. But she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The night everything came to a head started off like any other. Emily was in a good mood, probably because she thought she'd gotten away with everything. She even cooked dinner, something she rarely did anymore. As we sat at the table, I decided to test the waters. "Hey," I said casually, "I was thinking we should take a trip soon. Just the two of us. Maybe go back to that cabin we stayed at for our anniversary last year." She hesitated, her fork pausing midair. "Oh, I don't know. Work's been so busy lately. Maybe in a few months?" "Work, huh?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "You've been working a lot lately. Late nights, weekends, must be exhausting." She looked at me sharply, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said quickly, holding up my hands. "Just saying you've been busy. I miss spending time with you, that's all." Her expression softened slightly, but there was still a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "I miss you too," she said, her voice suddenly sweet. "We'll plan something soon, I promise." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But inside, I was counting down the hours until my plan would finally come together. The next morning, I woke up with a clear mind and a purpose. Everything was in place: the screenshots, the locations, the receipts. I even had the video of her walking into the hotel with Ryan. It wasn't just evidence. It was a ticking time bomb, and I was holding the detonator. Emily acted normal, as if nothing was wrong. She kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, completely unaware of what I was about to do. Once she was out the door, I made a few final preparations. I contacted her parents. Yes, her parents. They were good people, and I felt they deserved to know the truth before the storm hit. Her dad picked up the phone. "Hey, John," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's something I need to talk to you about. It's about Emily." "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern lacing his tone. "Not really," I replied. "Can you and Carol come over tonight? It's important." He agreed, and I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm. The wheels were already in motion. By the time Emily came home that evening, I had everything set. Her parents were sitting in the living room, looking confused but concerned. Emily walked in, her smile fading the moment she saw them. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us. I stood up, holding the folder of evidence in my hands. "Emily," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk." Her eyes widened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw fear on her face. Emily froze in the doorway, her eyes darting between me, her parents, and the folder in my hands. The confident smirk she usually wore was gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. For a moment, it seemed like she might bolt back out the door, but instead, she forced a smile and walked in. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it with a casual tone. I gestured to the couch. "Why don't you have a seat, Emily? We need to talk." Her parents exchanged uneasy glances, clearly sensing that something was very wrong. Emily hesitated, but eventually sat down, crossing her arms defensively. "All right," she said. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. "Emily," I began, "I've been noticing some changes in your behavior lately. Late nights, vague explanations, excuses that don't add up." I wanted to believe it was nothing, but I couldn't ignore the signs. Her face turned pale, but she quickly recovered, plastering on a fake smile. "Are you serious? You're making this into a big drama for no reason." "I told you, I've been busy with work." "Work?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "You mean all those late-night meetings and work dinners? Like the one at the hotel last Saturday?" Her expression faltered, and her parents gasped. "What's he talking about, Emily?" her father demanded. "I don't know," she snapped, glaring at me. "He's just being paranoid." I held up the folder. "This isn't paranoia, Emily. This is evidence. Texts, locations, receipts, even a video of you walking into that hotel with Ryan." Her face went white as a sheet. You followed me?" she stammered. "I did," I said, my voice unwavering, because I couldn't stand being lied to anymore. Her parents looked horrified. Her mother covered her mouth, while her father clenched his fists. "Is this true, Emily?" her dad asked, his voice trembling with anger. She stood up, her face twisting into a mask of defiance. "So what if it is?" she spat. "Do you know what it's like to live with someone like him? He's boring, predictable, and pathetic. I needed excitement, and Ryan gave me that." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I calmly placed the folder on the coffee table and stepped back. "You've made your choices, Emily. Now you'll have to live with the consequences." Her father stood up, his face red with fury. "You've humiliated this family, Emily. After everything he's done for you. After 12 years of marriage, this is how you repay him." Emily rolled her eyes, her usual arrogance returning. "Oh, please, spare me the lecture, Dad. This is between me and him." "No, Emily," I said quietly. "This is between all of us now. You've dragged everyone into this mess." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. But instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, she stormed out of the living room, slamming the door behind her. Her mother started crying, and her father shook his head, looking at me with sorrow in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, son," he said. "You didn't deserve this." "No," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I didn't, but I'm not done yet." After Emily stormed out of the room, her parents stayed behind, both shaken by what had just unfolded. Her mom was dabbing at her tears with a tissue, and her dad kept muttering things like, unbelievable, and where did we go wrong? I tried to comfort them, but honestly, I was just as broken as they were, if not more. Eventually, they left, apologizing over and over for Emily's behavior, even though none of this was their fault. I assured them that I'd figure things out and thanked them for coming. When they left, I sat in silence, staring at the folder on the coffee table. I had done what I set out to do, confront Emily and expose the truth. But somehow, it still didn't feel like enough. That's when Emily came back. She stormed into the living room, her face red with fury, and slammed her purse onto the table. "How dare you bring my parents into this?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me?" I raised an eyebrow, utterly stunned by her audacity. "You're embarrassed? Emily, you've been sneaking around with another man, lying to me, and disrespecting our marriage, and you're worried about being humiliated? You're overreacting," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Ryan and I," she stopped herself, her mouth snapping shut, but it was too late. "Go ahead," I said, my voice icy. "Finish that sentence. Ryan and you what? You love him? You've been sleeping with him? You think you can just trade me in for someone more exciting?" She glared at me, her jaw tight. "You don't understand," she said. "You've been so boring, so predictable. You never do anything spontaneous, never make me feel alive. Ryan, he makes me feel like I'm someone again, someone who matters." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see how deeply they hurt me. "So this is my fault now?" I asked, laughing bitterly. 12 years of loyalty, of putting you first, of building a life together. And this is how you repay me? By running off with someone else because I wasn't exciting enough for you? She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. "I hope Ryan was worth it," I said, my voice cold and steady, "because you've thrown away everything we had for him. And when this all falls apart, and trust me, it will, you'll realize just how badly you've messed up." She rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. We'll get past this. Couples do it all the time. You just need to accept that I need more freedom. If you really loved me, you'd understand that." That was the final straw. I stood up, my hands trembling with anger. "Love? Don't you dare talk to me about love. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied, cheated, and treated me like I'm disposable." For the first time, I saw her confidence waver. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the living room, alone with my thoughts. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just done. Done trying to fix something that wasn't worth fixing. Done making excuses for her behavior. Done pretending that this was a marriage worth saving. The next morning, I made an appointment with my lawyer. The morning after our confrontation, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning in anger or betrayal. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. It was time to take control of my life again. Emily was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, sipping her coffee as if nothing had happened. She didn't even look at me, her cold indifference cutting deeper than any argument we'd ever had. "I've made an appointment with my lawyer," I said, breaking the silence. That got her attention. She set her mug down, her eyes narrowing. "Are you serious?" "As serious as you were about sneaking around with Ryan," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm filing for divorce, Emily. It's over." She laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. You're not actually going to throw away 12 years of marriage over this. People make mistakes. Couples move past these things." "Mistakes?" I repeated, my anger bubbling to the surface. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or leaving the toilet seat up. What you did was a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice to lie, cheat, and destroy our marriage." Her face hardened. "Fine. If that's what you want, go ahead. But don't expect me to just roll over and let you take everything." "I don't want everything, Emily," I said. "I just want my dignity back and a clean break from you." Her eyes flickered with something. Panic, maybe, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "You'll regret this," she said. "You're not going to find anyone else who'll put up with you the way I have." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words only confirmed what I already knew. She would never take responsibility for her actions. She'd always blame me, or Ryan, or anyone but herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings with my lawyer, and moving out of the house. I left Emily everything she seemed to care about: the house, the fancy furniture, even the car she used to drive to her work dinners. I didn't need any of it. I just wanted my freedom. She tried to fight me on a few things, claimed she deserved more, that I was being unfair. But in the end, the evidence I had was enough to shut her down. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected, and just like that, 12 years of my life were reduced to a signature on a piece of paper. The last time I saw Emily was at the courthouse. She looked different, tired, defeated. Ryan wasn't with her, and I couldn't help but wonder if things had already started falling apart between them. As we signed the final documents, she looked at me and said, "I hope you're happy now." "I am," I replied, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. It's been a few months since then, and life is slowly starting to feel normal again. I've moved into a small apartment, started focusing on my hobbies, and even reconnected with some old friends. I'm not going to pretend it's been easy. There are still days when the pain creeps back in, when I question how I didn't see the signs sooner. But those days are becoming fewer and farther between. As for Emily, last I heard, things didn't work out with Ryan. Apparently, he moved on to someone else, someone more exciting. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little vindicated, but mostly, I just feel free. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, you deserve better. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough, or that their betrayal is your fault. It's not easy, but walking away from someone who doesn't value you is the first step toward finding peace. And peace, I've learned, is worth everything.